everyone, Joe Fox here for another episode of Retain, Grow, Thrive, the Growave podcast. Today, I'm joined by a very, very special partner of ours and a good friend of mine, Tabish. Now, Tabish is a bit of a unique case here because he not only is a partner of ours, owns an amazing agency that does incredible work, but he's also a founder of an e-commerce brand on Shopify Plus called GirlDad, which is very close to his heart. So I'm very excited to announce my very, very close friend Tabish on here. Tabish, please give a little bit of a background on you, Mastrat, what you're doing with GirlDad, and who you are as a human being.
Yeah, man. Thanks, Joe, for having me on the podcast. I think that intro was fantastic already. I don't know how I can top that, but look, I started Mastrat close to a decade ago. I had just left my family business, which was import-export. I was constantly traveling. Vegas one day, Germany the other, China the next, Toronto lots and lots of times. And I did all that import-export stuff, closed a lot of deals, found a lot of products that we just couldn't get exclusively in the market. And we made those deals, especially with companies like BIC. You guys might recognize the lighters.
BIC lighters? Yeah.
So for, I think, close to 15, 16 years, we just couldn't get a direct deal with them going. And, I was ready when the status quo changed with their distributors. And I said, hey, listen, we're your huckleberry, right? So, and then, traveling to the ends of this earth, places that, the owners had never traveled to make deals and get merchandise, that really set us apart. So I started Mastrat. On the tail end of that, I just got tired of all that traveling. It takes its toll on your body. People think, oh, you're traveling, you're having this great time, you're seeing all these places, and all you really see is insides of hotel rooms. And
absolutely.
So I was getting married. I said, you know what, time for a change. I moved to Toronto, which is where my wife is from, which is where I am now. And I needed to start making money. My academic background is in public relations and communications management, and I have a master's in that. And I couldn't get a job because I was too experienced to start as an intern, but not experienced enough in PR and comms. So I said, okay, got to put food on the table, newly married. What do I have to show for myself? And so I started, I'm going to do lead gen for real estate, picked a niche, learned marketing really quickly. I had a good mentor to just, help me with the mindset.
Nice.
Started that with real estate, started white labeling for other agencies because my email marketing strategies and approach to it in real estate was very applicable to e-commerce brands. And we were doing a lot of one-to-one personalization in real estate. And that was kind of missing in e-commerce almost like 10 years ago. It wasn't as ubiquitous as it is now. COVID hit, we were doing white labeling for other agencies, doing email marketing for other brands. COVID hit, pivoted completely into e-commerce. And so fundamentally, my first client was started his business as a drop shipping business, selling shaving machines. That became a huge unicorn, millions and millions of dollars in sale. They had their own inventory. I really learned a lot during that time and executed a lot, brought in all the expertise from the real estate side of things, and really provided a solid customer experience. And I realized this is what I'm really good at. And so what does Mastrat do today? Mastrat helps e-commerce brands in the food, health industry, ideally in subscription spaces, to generate more than 30% of the revenue through email and SMS. And that's kind of a narrow scope. What we really help clients do is activate and keep their customers and make sure that they're loyal. And we do this through a number of strategies. Most of it involves really deep diving into the customer psyche and looking at reviews, looking at what the customer is not saying, and then using that to talk to them. So that's what Mastrat does in a nutshell.
That's awesome. And, you've touched on a couple of things there that are passionate to you. And I know, you're a very dedicated family man and everything like that. So I feel like that's a good way of talking a little bit about GirlDad, I think the premise of this is just so awesome, and I love it a lot, and I know how much of a good dad you are, so touches close to home on that front. But tell us a little bit about GirlDad, and I guess can you elaborate on how? Because I know that you use GirlDad as a very good testing platform, and you stress test it, try different things.
Yeah.
So and I know that's on Plus too. So tell me a little bit more about, Girl Dad, how that came about and where you see that fitting into the market.
Yeah. So I always thought I'd be a better father and build on the shoulders and all the teachings of my parents. My parents were fantastic, supportive, really gave me the freedom to explore life. Um, and so I said, I'm going to be an even better father. And I wanted to do something to honor my daughter when she was born. And she's 3.5 years old now. So for the first year and a half, I was thinking about, hey, what can I do to honor my daughter and show to her that she too can build something great if she just perseveres and has grit and determination. So Girl Dad was a culmination of all of those thoughts. Uh, and we're still dealing with the legality of it all, the trademark issues, different regions, and by we I mean me because it is just
Yeah.
me. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to create one of the best hats in the market. I have a 20-page document which tells the factories what not to do and what to do
Yes.
when it comes to quality.
Yeah.
And so I said I'm going to best quality, best embroidery, amazing colors, doesn't look anything like a dad cap. It's going
Hmm.
to be something that you can style with your clothes, with your whether it's semi-formal clothes or casual clothes. Like you're going to look like you're wearing a good quality hat. And I think mission accomplished because just today I received a message from a customer in the UK saying that the quality is just immaculate, right? And it seems to be the recurring theme. I think I've done a good job. Now, Girl Dad is an amazing hack, and I think it's a great hack for agencies to have their own brand because they can really think like the brand owner, especially if they're working with smaller brands with 1 to 5 people operations. I
Yeah.
can really think about what my customer wants, extrapolate that, and then apply to messaging for my clients, customers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the biggest things that I've noticed is it was really hard to gain momentum in the beginning, but slowly having conversations one on one, like I spent hours talking to people just to sell one hat, make $5 off of a hat.
Yeah.
Um, and today, like I've got reviews that people are saying, "Hey, I thought this was a scam, but I just ordered it and it's the best quality hat I've ever had," or my
I
husband
love
loves it.
that.
Yeah, most
Yeah.
wives will order it for their husbands when they're becoming a second time girl dad or a first time girl dad.
Yeah.
And then so the quality kind of helped get the reviews in. There were people that I was talking to that placed an order and canceled it because financial difficulties. As a new parent, it's really hard to juggle finances. And so one of the things I did is I received an order from somebody whose name I recognize because I tend to write all Canadian orders. I tend to write handwritten thank you notes,
Oh,
and I have
nice.
all the
That's a cool touch. Yeah.
yeah, and I have all the customer service conversations myself, right? Because I really want to learn about what my customer is thinking and who they are. And so I recognized the name and I said, "This is their second order, but I don't think so." So I looked at their email chain that I had with them, and then so when I wrote the note, it was a very personalized note, hoping their daughter had a great birthday in November, and I'm glad to see that she's back, sort of stuff like that, right? And that personal touch, I think, really helps me understand my customer, and then I can go into my clients' accounts and apply the same learnings. But it's such a hack as an
Yeah.
agency owner having a
Yeah.
brand, and then as a brand owner having an agency, right? Because it goes
Yes.
both ways. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's what Girl Dad is. It's a way for me to honor my daughter and help her understand that she too can build something great.
I love that. I love that. It's like a legacy component to it and a
Yeah.
proper, like, early business lesson, which I think is amazing. And I'm sure as she grows older, she'll come to understand that more and respect that and love that. And as the brand grows too, I'm sure she's going to see people out in the wild with those hats on in public. And that's going to be a really cool moment for you. Um,
Mhm.
I want to touch back on that point you made around that being a hack because have worked with hundreds of agencies over the years. We work with a lot of agencies now at Growave, and I think the thing that I really like about what you do at Mastrat is, and some other partners do it, but I think you do it incredibly well as well. It's the when you make a decision on something, it's been well tested, well thought out, but then you execute very quickly. I think that's a really cool kind of thing. And I wonder if that is from having that kind of customer mindset too. It's like, okay, this is the decision that's been made to execute on something. Let's do it quickly and move quick because we know that this is going to work, or we need to try it to see if it's going to work. And I think that's something I've noticed you do at Mastrat is everything's very carefully considered, but then executed very well. So it's cool to see.
Yeah, I think the when I started getting prospects right out the gate, during COVID, our selling point quickly changed from us doing email marketing to the value that we brought. And one of our values was agility, because a lot of the people that I was talking to were working with big agencies. And these are your top 6, top 7 agencies that do practically everything. So our pitch was, hey, we're a lot more agile, because that was a complaint that the customer had, the clients had.
Yes.
That it's taking 3-4 weeks to send an email, especially if it's not planned. So the agility was a big selling point. And that's one of the reasons that we got customers on board. And then inertia is the biggest agency killer, or a biggest deal killer, I would say. And so from day one, and I've learned this throughout my life, is every time I delay on something, I'm losing that deal, I'm losing that prospect, I'm losing that conversation, I'm losing that credibility. So our thing is, never let inertia overcome momentum. And so when we plan on something, we tend to execute it relatively quickly. And if there's like last minute emails, hey, we've got all of that prepped part of our playbook. We're ready to go on all that stuff. And sometimes we test things with the hypothesis that this test will not make any difference, but let's be sure. And sometimes you run those tests just to make sure that you are not being biased, right? And I think you have to just look at data. And so some of the data from GirlDad is reviews really drive momentum. And so our focus has to be on reviews, right? Especially to convert people that are just prospects. There's huge inertia there. And so we try to overcome that for GirlDad, but also for all of our clients. We focus heavily on those reviews. And I think that they tend to convert a lot better for first-time customers.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's something that's always, when I first kind of moved into this SaaS space and particularly into the reviews space, I always kind of have thought of it not just as reviews, but it's really like, it sounds cheesy, but it's your online word of mouth. And word of mouth, as we know, is the quickest fertilizer to help a business grow, or the quickest fertilizer for a business to get thrown in the trash, right? Like it can make or break a business very easily. So I think, focusing on that online reputation and word of mouth is really key. So I agree 100%. There's a couple of points you mentioned there that I kind of want to circle back to in a second. I think it's really relevant. We had this event recently in Toronto. That was when everyone was first learning, that we did with Klaviyo, and we were first learning about what was happening with tariffs. And, you could see the fear in people's eyes, literally. And obviously, that's all kind of, who knows where that's at right now, right? Like, we've got this pause in place at the moment, but people are going back and forth. It's causing a lot of chaos in general and just uncertainty. And we know that when people are uncertain, people are not really necessarily spending. They're focusing on building up the war chest and building up their savings and stuff. So I think I'd love to get your thoughts on, where we are right now. We're definitely going to be, mentioning this again in the future, but I'd love to see where your thoughts are at just on the current Shopify e-commerce landscape as it stands like today. Like, what do you see happening? What do you think is the most important thing that merchants should be focusing on And, you know, where do you think we're heading into a bullish period or a bearish period? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so that's a lot to unpack. When volatility strikes, which is what we've been dealing with, past COVID, during COVID in the beginning, but then also past COVID, and then now with the tariffs, so that's one thing. But the other thing is you've got this North American border, right? So you've got Canada and US that the economies are inextricably linked,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and then so you're contending with that, but then you're also contending with uh, importing into Canada, importing into the US from third parties or third party regions, such as China, obviously. You're dealing with a lot of that. And then so the customer has two things, right? Either the customer goes and hoards, especially with items that are very important, like daily sanitary items. If you remember toilet paper game,
Yes.
right?
Oh my goodness. Sorry. On that note, have you seen the Curb Your Enthusiasm
No, I
episode?
haven't.
Oh, you've got to. I'll send you a clip from it after this. It's hilarious.
I'd love to see it, but I mean, you see how comedy is a reflection of reality, right?
Yeah.
And that's fundamentally, I think, what you're referring to. But people like bought like skids of Lysol wipes and toilet paper and eggs, and eggs is a big issue right now in the U.S. But
Mm-hmm.
what ends up happening psychologically, the customer wants to make sure that their money goes far, and they don't get a bad deal. They don't get a bad
Yeah.
value. And if you've, as a brand, laid the groundwork for trust and credibility, you're not going to have much of an issue having your customer continue buying from you or buy from you the first time. But if you're already doing that, then you need to lean into those values even more. And if you're not doing that, you're focused on transactional relationship, right? Then you need to start thinking about, hey, how do I activate this customer? How do I find the shared values that I have with them? How do I give them comfort that their money is well spent with us and that they've made the right decision?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Buyer's remorse is a real thing, but now it's hard to even get to that point, right? And I'm saying this obviously with the temperance that it's not like black and white, right? There's different industries, different niches, there's different spending capacities. Like Harvard has an article about the 4 or 5 different types of spenders. There's the pained but patient, and there's one that completely stops their spending. There's one that's
Mm-hmm.
never going to change their spending. So you really got to know your audience when you're trying to talk to somebody, right? And then depending on where your audience falls, you need to cater your messaging over there. What's happening with the Shopify landscape? I think Shopify is just dominating, right? But people
Oh
are
yeah. It's sorry, to that point, like every time I open up something on LinkedIn, and obviously we scroll through everyone's AI fluff and AI posts,
yeah.
the main sort of posts that I'm digesting at the moment are just all about how much the Shopify ecosystem is crushing it at the moment. So I just
Yeah.
want to add to that point. It's like the momentum that company has is absolutely insane. Obviously, there's all this stuff that they're looking at doing, with OpenAI. Like it's just, it's insane. Absolutely insane.
I think we should talk about AI and how that's going to impact all of our jobs and what way it'll impact our jobs. But you're absolutely right. Shopify is dominating. It's a commodity. And even with GirlDad Co, we use Shopify, and I've learned to use Shopify in ways that I never did before because it wasn't my primary offering. And now we're able to roll it into our offering and then create value add for our customers, right? So Shopify is a fantastic example of the zeitgeist or what contemporary e-commerce looks like. But then there's another player, Klaviyo. Klaviyo has commoditized e-commerce email marketing, SMS marketing, pop-ups. So it's bringing consolidation into its product offering, but then it's also, by definition of being commoditized, going to hit I guess a peak, for a lack of a better word, where they're going to have to start diversifying outside of just the Shopify ecosystem. And then so you've got a lot of brick and mortar stores. You've got other wholesale businesses. Some are using ShopSite. You might have, some of your users might not even have heard of it. You've got BigCommerce, obviously. You've got Magento. Then you've got stuff that's more obscure, like Rics, RICS. And we're seeing a lot of prospects coming in saying we want to integrate Rics with Klaviyo, and then so we're doing the API development work. But you've got these centers of influence in the e-commerce space and the SMB space, and primarily revolve around Shopify and Klaviyo. And then they obviously branch out into different tech partnerships. So there is shift. Some people are tired of costs, and when volatility hits and cost of product goes up, the first thing they do is cut costs everywhere else.
Yeah.
Because without product, you can't run a business.
That's where we're absolutely, I guess, no, I wouldn't say dominating, but we're not Shopify dominating, but we're gathering so much momentum in this space because we're Shopify and Shopify Plus only.
Yeah.
Where our biggest integration sort of crossover is with Klaviyo. 70% of our 15,000 customers at Growave are using Klaviyo. We're doubling down on the quality of all of the integrations with that. We're consolidating a whole bunch of things that used to sit separately into one.
Yeah.
And we're doing it for an absolute fraction of the cost of our competitors. And in my opinion, our customer service is better. You can attest to that, I think, from a partnership side of things. So it's kind of, I think, as much as I look at this, as much as I look at what's happening with the economy and all of those sorts of things on an individual basis, you and I can only do the things that we mentioned earlier, like what you're doing with GirlDad, creating a very positive and good environment and good impact on your daughter for the future, right? I can only impact and have a good positive impact based upon my immediate surrounding circumstances.
Yeah.
So I think when people go too deep onto this economy stuff, it's like, okay, cool, but what are you actually going to do about it? But in the case of what we're doing on a business front, I think I can, positively say, based upon these things we're doing at Growave, we actually really are trying to help merchants get rid of that overhead, cut down on that cost. This cool calculator thing that we made recently, which was before the we had this plan before the tariffs. So it's kind of like these things are all falling into place. But, we've specifically created those tools to help merchants in this time, to help our agency partners in this time.
Yeah.
As you know, it's kind of like not only are merchants now like, how can I leverage my existing customer base to, as you mentioned earlier, like bank on that loyalty. Yeah. It's kind of also like, I also need to severely reduce my overheads, right?
Yeah.
Like I need to turn off any advertising that was an experiment and isn't working. I need to reduce my tech bloat. I need everything to be more streamlined.
Yeah.
And so as much as I think, sometimes that can seem like a really daunting task for a merchant looking at their business, I also think it can be a time to say, hey, all those little changes and things that I know I've needed to be doing but haven't done yet, I'm going to work with my agency partners to do that now. Or I'm going to work with our internal team to do that now. And that's kind of, I guess, my point to where I see the current Shopify landscape is like, you mentioned Shopify POS there. There's some incredible things happening in that space with this unified commerce that Harley and everyone at Shopify keeps talking about. So I think that is such an important area that everyone needs to get really focused on. Is there is this mass consolidation play, and the powerhouses like Shopify and Klaviyo and are doing that incredibly well. And I think the plugins to that are operating leanly and effectively, not bloated by VC, not charging a fortune to customers, are going to be the ones that win in that space. Sorry for the rant, but I just think it's like, I'm hearing so much negativity around this, and instead of using it as an opportunity to springboard its positive change.
I think the key word here is consolidation. And consolidation can be a double-edged sword. but there's different perspectives, right? So why do we work with Growave? Because we can manage everything, the whole suite, all in one login account. It reduces the amount of time we spend doing something for a client. And when a company like Growave, you guys do a lot of product development, a lot of listening to your agency partners and iterating on the product, it helps us do a better job as agencies and then provide better value to the client. And the client says, oh, this guy has influence. And this will set apart a mediocre agency or a Me Too agency from a really solid agency like ours, is that we have influence on the product that we use. And so our scope of influence goes beyond just using a product and being proficient with that product. But proficiency is key. And the way you get to proficiency is reduce all the bloatware. You don't want to be able to do 10,000 things. You want to be able to do a few things really well, but also so well that it is an entire ecosystem that's holistically contained, right? There was a time, and I won't name any names, but we were using a pop-up company, an app, just fantastic. We became really good at it. It became part of our proficiency. It became part of our tech stack. And we were doing a really good job. And then we had to switch to another pop-up because we thought that they're doing better product development. A few weeks later, they sold to another company. And we could no longer use that product. And it was a big company, right? That makes us look silly in front of our clients because our clients look to us to be the voice of reason, to have our ears on the ground and be able to have a vision of where this is all headed. So it's important for us to have partnerships that are meaningful, that we believe are not in it for like pump and dump or like to sell. And then you mentioned the VC stuff and being bloated by all of it. So we want as an agency to do a really good job in a very good amount of time. So time compression is really important to us because our margins are thin, contrary to what people believe. Like we don't have 55, 65% margins, right? And especially if we need to be agile, we need to do last minute stuff or additional stuff, those margins, it really eats into it. So we need to be agile. That means we need consolidation and also need influence on the product. And we need partners like you that listen. I've been around in this ecosystem for a lot longer than a lot of agencies. And I've seen this cycle of ununified tech stack. So you've got an app for pop-up, you've got an app for reviews, you've got an app for loyalty, you've got an app for email, you've got an app for SMS. This all gets consolidated slowly, which, in modern age technological convergence happened with lead pages and center, all of that kind of consolidated. And the problem ended up happening was that they couldn't support that product that they had created. And the tech integration started falling by the wayside. So all of that split back out, right? Then you had separate product again. And all of that kind of also coincides with the tail end of the recession and this extended period of low spending that we had. And now we're coming back into technological convergence and everything kind of consolidating. But this time, it's a little different. It's not just an economical thing. It's also a customer experience thing. Right?
Yes.
If you have all of your customer data points in one place, you can make better decisions about that customer and provide better service to that customer and reduce the amount of time you spend doing all of that. Right? So that's why suites like Growave come into play, suites like Klaviyo come into play, Shopify's ecosystem comes into play. I think that consolidation now is happening for multiple reasons, but the primary reasons are sustainable, right?
Yes.
Sustainable for agencies, sustainable for brands because they're not spending a lot of money for each of these technologies. Able to service the customer, so less money spent on customer service and where are my support tickets, where's my order tickets, all of that stuff really leads to a solid customer experience. And you could just start bare bones. Solid customer experience is best business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's some incredible insights there. I don't really have too much to add to that because that was a very, 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 very good way of summing everything up that's happening in the market. It's very interesting. And, we're good friends, so we are lucky enough to talk about this a lot, and we'll certainly be doing more of this. But I guess because we are kind of getting near time, you and I can chat forever, as I just said. But I kind of there's two things that I kind of want to do before we jump into the last question. One is, you know, with all your knowledge from GirlDad, from all of your knowledge in this space at Mastrat, working across so many different verticals and so many cool up and coming brands globally. Is there anything, there's going to be a lot of, you've given, I think, a lot of good advice here to agencies and to merchants, but is there anything you want to offer your ICP merchants who are, watching this today?
Yeah, absolutely. So the last year and a half, especially, I've looked at a lot of accounts that fall within our ICP. Our ICP is any brand that does $300,000 MRR to $1 million MRR. We don't do anything below that, just because there's just no value we can provide for the cost of our service and then the breadth of our service. So for that ICP, what I've noticed is every time we've audited an account, you think they're a big account and they're spending all this money and they have all these resources, and you go look at their email and SMS setup and their messaging, and it's so rudimentary. And and you don't know what you don't know.
Yes.
As a brand, it's really hard for you to know what you don't know. But as an agency, we see the whole horizon, right? We see the breadth of it all. We see really good setups, really bad setups, and because we work in that gamut, we're able to quickly and effectively identify lifecycle gaps and present that to the client and say, hey, here's gaps you can fill out either yourself or we can fill them for you. It typically starts with a detailed audit of the life cycle of the customer life cycle, but also the tech stack. And typically we charge $2,000-$3,000 for this audit. Depends on how big the account is, if it's multiple regions, if it's multiple Klaviyo accounts, for example. But on average, this falls at an $1,800 mark. And I'm more than happy to offer it to your podcast listeners, Joe, Growave's podcast listeners, for 20% off right out the gate, no questions. And the way we do this is we do a detailed analysis. We provide all of our recommendations. We don't hold anything back. Okay. This goes from the top to the very granular. Everything from like sending and domain reputation all the way to like flow filters and messaging. And you could go ahead and implement this yourself. Like if you're a brand in $1,800 or whatever, you've just basically created 10-15% of more revenue in perpetuity. Or we can implement it for you. But fundamentally, that $1,800 audit, we're happy to do 20% off for any of your customers, Joe.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. That's incredibly kind of you. And I think, I, having had the pleasure of, being your friend and us partnering between Growave and Mastrat, I kind of mentioned earlier on the pod, is like that attention to detail is like so spot on. And, you're 100% right. If a merchant did want to implement that themselves and just check where they're at, that is an incredibly good value offer of being able to have a really good place to check exactly where you're at and if it's working effectively. So thank you for that, Tabish. Last of all, I'd like to ask everyone this. I've had some very quirky answers over the episode so far.
I'm scared now.
I think I know what yours is going to be. But just lastly, you spoke about travel and all the travel you've done, over the years. I know you do a little less now, but you still travel quite a bit, I would say, compared to a lot of people. What is one thing when you're traveling, when you're at home, when you're anywhere, what's the one thing you can't live without? And you can't say people. It's got to be an object.
Man, people is. I've realized I can live without people for the most part. And that's a very sad thing to say, but I was working from home before working from home was cool. I've been doing this for 10 years in my office or in my den. I'll tell you recently what I really enjoying is a coffee, sitting in one of my rooms where there's sunlight coming directly in there, and reading Stanley Tucci's book All I Ate in 1 Year. It's a very light read, very gustatory experience inside your head. It doesn't take a lot of energy, and I think the biggest thing for us agency people is our brains run at 1,000 miles an hour, and we need to slow it down. And that's what slows me down, because if you have space in your mind, you can think creatively and think as a visionary, as opposed to just as a tactician, constantly trying to solve problems. So, yeah.
Be more proactive than reactive when you're in that headspace. Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I hear you on that. It's interesting. The reading thing comes up so much, but in different kind of like ways and segments.
Yeah.
So, and I say this all the time, but I am a very, very, very big believer in the fact that, readers are leaders and leaders are readers. So, yeah, 100%.
I love podcasts. I love reading industry related material. But that doesn't decompress me. That runs my brain.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
So that and a little bit of, coffee, sunlight, and a good book. It works universally, I think.
Absolutely. The simple things, 100%. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tabish. Best place for people to connect with you, is it you want people to reach out on LinkedIn?
Yeah.
We'll include the link.
Yeah, LinkedIn is easy. I'm fairly active on LinkedIn. I don't like Twitter because of the DTC bros. I called it out. It becomes an echo chamber. But yeah, LinkedIn is a great place that I've met a lot of people, and I'm more than happy to meet people continuously. So yeah, please connect with me on LinkedIn and let's have conversations.
Absolutely, and we'll make sure that the links are in the show notes. Tabish, as always, my friend, so great catching up. Thank you so much for the insights you shared with the audience. We really, really appreciate it here at Growave. So yeah, thank you so much for being one of our early guests. First and certainly not last time that you'll be on this, my friend. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. We have lots to talk about, so I'm sure we'll be connecting again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, mate. I'll chat to you shortly. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.